Hi. I have a few things at the top before we get started. As the president and his team continue working to deliver a historic bipartisan agreement on the border, House Republicans have a choice to make. They can keep playing politics, or they can work in a bipartisan way to secure the border. Sadly, this is not new. For years, they have refused to heed the president's request for action on much-needed funding for border security. For example, in the bill the president introduced in his first day in office more than 1,000 days ago, he requested funding to develop and deploy expediting screening technology to improve our ability to catch narcotics and contraband at every port of entry. Republicans never acted on the bill. Each year in office, President Biden has requested record-breaking border security funding into law. But without exception, House Republicans have tried to stop the president from delivering the resources we need at the border. As recently as October, President Biden submitted a supplemental request for additional resources for border security. House Republicans did not take it up. Now, House Republicans are going further and signaling that they may refuse even to consider a historic bipartisan border security deal that would strengthen America's national security. Perhaps Speaker Johnson and House Republicans should reflect on what they've had to say over just the past few months. In October, Speaker Johnson said, "We must come together and address the broken border." And in November, he said, "I think we can get a bipartisan agreement on border security." But suddenly, we've heard a change of tune. One Republican member from Texas even said, why would they do anything to help President Biden? This is about helping the president. This is about helping the American people. It's not about helping the president. It's about the American people. This is about securing the border. Republicans in the Senate are working with us to do just that. Republicans in the House should as well. Look no further than their effort to impeach Secretary Mayorkas, an impeachment that even conservatives say is unconstitutional. The Wall Street Journal editorial board said, "Grandstanding is easier than governing," and Republicans have to decide whether to accomplish anything other than impeaching Democrats. Impeaching him accomplishes nothing beyond political symbolism. A better idea is to strike a deal with Mr. Biden on serious border security reforms. That's from the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Former President Trump's own impeachment lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, urged Republicans to vote no. House Republicans' own impeachment witness, Jonathan Turley, said there is no basis for impeachment. And former DHS Secretary Michael Chertoff, who served in Bush administration, said House Republicans should drop this impeachment charade and work with Mr. Mayorkas to deliver for the American people. Members of the House Republican Conference have said this is baseless. Congressman Ken Buck said Secretary Mayorkas did not commit an impeachable offense. And Congressman Tom McClintock said these are not impeachable offenses. So our challenge to House Republicans is this. Will you go against the very voices you typically listen to, play a dangerous, unconstitutional game? Or will you listen to what many of you yourselves have been saying? Come to the table, work on a bipartisan border security solutions, finally fund our needs at the border, and actually tackle the problem instead of playing politics with it. So this is not about politics. This is about bipartisan solutions to help the American people and secure the border. We hope for the sake of the country, House Republicans change course from their years of playing politics with this issue. So now yesterday, a new IMF report found that the United States is leading the global economic recovery. As Axios put it, the U.S. is winning the world economic war. The United States economy grew faster than any other large advanced economy last year by a wide margin and is on track to do so again in 2024. And the Washington Post wrote earlier this week, falling inflation rising growth give U.S. the world's best recovery. That's thanks to strong actions taken by this president to recover from the pandemic and invest in America. And yesterday we got new evidence Americans are seeing the results, with consumer confidence at the highest level in more than 2 years, and inflation expectations falling to the lowest level since the start of the pandemic. And before I turn it over to my colleague, Admiral John Kirby, as you all know, this Friday, the President and the First Lady are honored to attend the dignified transfer of the 3 U.S. Army soldiers we lost in Jordan. As the President said, these service members represented the very, very best of our nation. The President spoke to each of the families yesterday to offer his heartfelt condolences, and he and the First Lady will have an opportunity to meet with them in person in Dover on Friday. As the Pentagon announced yesterday, the President and the First Lady will be joined by Secretary of Defense. And so with that, Admiral.
Just very briefly here at the top, I just want to note that the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan had a chance to meet today with the Israeli Minister for Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, while he was here in town. They, of course, discussed the situation on the ground in Gaza. Also had an opportunity to talk about continued efforts to increase the flow of humanitarian assistance into the people of Gaza. And, of course, they talked about our ongoing collective efforts to get all the hostages released, get them back home with their families where they belong. And those negotiations and discussions are certainly ongoing right now. Now, this meeting comes on the heels of Jake's meeting yesterday with the families of the American hostages, and his discussion yesterday as well with the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Al Thani. Again, all really around trying to see what we can do to get another deal in place, another pause in place to get those hostages back with their families. With that.
Admiral, I want to make sure I get this right. Iran's ambassador to the UN warned today that Iran quote, would decisively respond to any attack on the country, its interests and nationals under any pretext. One, do you have any reaction to that warning? And two, more specifically, could that be read as a tacit acknowledgement by Iran that the U.S. can keep the Mideast conflict from expanding if President Biden shows restraint in his response that may be forthcoming?
Folks that need to show restraint are these groups that Iran backs. But nevertheless, I would just say a couple of things. First of all, as we've said many times, we don't seek a war with Iran. We're not looking for a broader conflict. We're not looking for a war with Iran. That's number one. Number two, we have obligations in the region, including those to our troops and our facilities. And now, as Karine reminded everybody, those attacks have taken the lives of 3 of them. We will do what we need to do to make sure that those responsible are held properly accountable.
And is there attribution yet of which militant group or groups were behind this?
We believe that the attack in Jordan was planned, resourced, and facilitated by an umbrella group called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, which contains multiple groups, including Kataib Hezbollah.
Was KH the principal behind it? They seem to have fingerprints of this sort of precise attack.
As I've said, I mean, this certainly has the earmarks of the kinds of things that Kataib Hezbollah does. But again, for our purposes today and the question you're asking, the attribution that our intelligence community is comfortable with is that this was done by the umbrella group called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq.
Thank you. John, can you tell us more about the latest hostage proposal that is supported by the U.S. and the Qataris? The U.S. ambassador to the UN said today that it envisions a much longer humanitarian pause than we saw back in November, plus more food and water and medicine. What details can you tell us?
Not a lot, and that's on purpose, because I don't want to say anything from the podium that could torpedo these very sensitive discussions. Nothing is negotiated until everything is negotiated, and not everything is fully negotiated at this point, Nancy. I will tell you that in broad strokes, we are looking at an extended pause is the goal. How long? That's all part of the discussions, but longer than what we saw in November, which was about a week. We'd like to see a longer pause than that. Not just because that helps facilitate the movement of so many more hostages out. You can get more people out if there's a longer stoppage in the fighting. But so it can also give us an opportunity to increase the flow of humanitarian assistance in.